in order to help Israel. It has put the aims of a foreign power above its own interests. And that's immoral. It's illegitimate. It's extremely unpopular domestically. And it just doesn't work. And one of the main things that people are telling the truth about that they didn't tell the truth about before is that our foreign policy really doesn't have much to do with what's good for the United States.
Tucker Carlson just slammed the Israel first mentality in Washington, and in this clip, he explains why this is causing such a big schism on the American right and in America itself, why the regime leads with regime change as the default foreign policy mechanism, what can we do to course correct, and why it's such a plague. So let's get into it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
The position of Donald Trump in the last election was America first. And what does America first mean? America first means, very simply, the U.S. government should act foremost on behalf of American citizens, which is to say every big decision the U.S. government makes should keep in mind the top of the list of concerns. How does this affect the people who pay for this and who I represent? And again, most people thought that was our system that we already had. Turns out it wasn't. Donald Trump awakened all of us to that. The system was not acting in the interest of the country. It was acting really without reference to the people who live in the country, just didn't care. And it was acting on behalf of a bunch of other different imperatives. And Donald Trump steered it back to where it was supposed to be in the first place, which was acting on behalf of America. That's what America first means. This was not just a popular message. This is the most popular political message that any candidate has delivered in many, many generations. And it's popular because, it's self-evidently true. Who wouldn't want that? And that message is the message that drew a record high number of famously Black voters, Latino voters, voters of all kinds, just American voters, united by a belief that the U.S. government ought to represent them and drain the swamp and no more pointless wars, et cetera, et cetera. But they're all branches of the same tree, which is America first.
Yeah, you'd think that's the biggest no-brainer ever to both sides of the political spectrum, the entire kind of populist base for the most part, except for the small few that do prioritize a pet foreign nation over their own. There are some that are Israel first. There are some that are even Ukraine first. But you'd think that this kind of idea, above any other political idea, can really cross boundaries. And it did. Electorally, it did. But that was an electoral farce. We're not seeing that manifest into actual political policy, even by an administration that wears that slogan as its cornerstone principle, America first. Well, the hypocrisy's too glaring when you prioritize Israel first.
Which is not only a non-threatening message, it's really the only legitimate message that a leader of America can send. And it's the only legitimate principle that can guide any American leader. So that is the winning message. If you're hoping to keep the Republican Party dominant or make it into something more positive than it currently is, cleave to that and you will win. It's super obvious. There's like no person who thinks about this for 6 minutes who could disagree with that. On the other side is a return to the Republican Party that we had before, which is a party that has all kinds of other agendas, most of which are never publicly revealed, and that spends a lot of its time policing its own members. Now, what does it attempt to achieve by policing them? Well, it attempts to achieve silence. It wants them to shut up about what is actually happening. And what is actually happening is that on the foreign policy side, which is the side that Washington cares about because it's got the most money and the most power, you can literally kill people, and there's no power greater than that. Our foreign policy is not wholly dependent on the whims of Israel. Of course, we have, acting in lots of parts of the world that have nothing to do with Israel, but it is unduly influenced by the concerns of Israel.
Yeah, who can deny this at this point? He's totally right. The Republican establishment still polices its own, and by the way, Trump has become the establishment, campaigning and endorsing people like Lindsey Graham and Randy Fine, those that are targeting, these derelict representatives like Thomas Massie who dare say this is an abomination, this isn't America first. We're done supporting Israel. Marjorie Taylor Greene doing the same. She being a target of a lot of these attacks, and Tucker himself being the target of a lot of these attacks. For what? For daring to say exactly what he's saying now. That's why Randy Fine calls him literally, this is verbatim, the most dangerous anti-Semite in America. And Trump is going to endorse that guy. Well, if that doesn't show backwardness, I don't know what does. If you're still pretending this is America first, I just think you're wrong. I'm sorry. There's always time to jump ship. I'm not gloating about it. I never supported Trump. I never supported any of his rivals in the presidential races. I thought they were all terrible too. But why feel the need to pick between two terrible people? Why not pay more attention to yourself, your family, and your locality, and call out evil when you see it in the foreign policy regime? And we see that in the foreign policy regime, regardless of who wins the presidency.
And in some cases, the U.S. government has acted, and these are all well known. The Iraq War, for example, has acted in ways that hurt the United States in order to help Israel. It has put the aims of a foreign power above its own interests. And that's immoral. It's illegitimate. It's extremely unpopular domestically. And it just doesn't work over time. That's not sustainable. There's no way to justify that. So rather than trying to justify it, they scream at people and tell them to be quiet and read them out of the movement and call them names and threaten them. But ultimately, because it's not a winning message, it cannot win over time, particularly if people are allowed or somehow manage to describe it accurately. And unfortunately for the guardians of the old system, the old Republican Party, people have been allowed to describe it accurately, mostly because Elon Musk opened up X. And, when he did that, you get all kinds of filth and nonsense and lies, but you also get some truth, actually quite a bit of truth.
Yeah, there's no doubt Twitter's in a better place than it was before. Is it perfect? No. Is there censorship still going on? Yes. Is there banning of accounts that call for murder unless they're part of the Israeli regime? Yes. There's a double standard for that. Certainly so. But what Tucker's saying is true. Americans have generally turned away from this Israel first mentality. Basically, all the polls show that, including this recent Pew Research poll, where about 60% of Americans now have an unfavorable opinion of Israel. And there was also another poll showing a 50-point swing in terms of sympathy toward the Palestinians. And how this relates to, domestic matters is pretty palpable to Americans too, when it's clear that our hate speech codes are being written to, conflate hate speech with criticism toward Israel. And how don't you see that in these political battles that play out with people like Ted Cruz calling Tucker, an anti-Semite too, and calling people Nazis that disagree only on this issue? It's not over any other issue that they've gone to war with their own tribe. It's only over Israel.
And one of the main things that people are telling the truth about that they didn't tell the truth about before is that our foreign policy really doesn't have much to do with what's good for the United States. And once those words have been uttered, they can't be taken back, and they change people's minds, and the polls reflect the fact that they have. People's views are different. So in the face of this kind of inevitable change of heart, collective change of heart in America, where both parties are like, wait, why are we doing this? The people who are benefiting from the old arrangement, which only continued because it was maintained by threats and silence, those people are going absolutely bonkers. And they have been all week, and they're claiming it's about one thing, the Holocaust or something like that. But no, really, it's about who controls the Republican Party after Donald Trump. That's what it's really about. So ignore the moral posturing. This is a power struggle, as all political parties have from time to time. And this one just happens to have a lot of emotionally unbalanced, hysterical people with no limits who have access to social media. So they're scaring the crap out of everybody. But it's really kind of a conventional power struggle.
Yeah, totally agree with that. They're calling these people Nazis and likening them to Hitler, just months removed of saying, hey, the left doing that to Trump so much is a reason that inspired, crooks to shoot at Trump and try to assassinate him. They don't care. They use those same tactics toward their own intrapersonal rivals and intra-party rivals, specifically over Israel. And Tucker's right. The American people have caught up on this issue far sooner than the political class did. This is apparent, and I think there's a parallel between now and 2016 when Trump got on the debate stage with Jeb Bush and, Carly Fiorina and, who was it, Greg Abbott and Rick Santorum and others, and skewered the Bush administration, saying it was a big fat lie that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and calling Bush a disaster when Jeb Bush was standing there. I mean, this was a breakthrough in terms of what was allowed to be acceptable from the Republican arena. And guess what? Americans didn't rally behind the old guard and Jeb Bush. They rallied around that idea. Well, the same thing's playing out now, where Americans know the truth that this Israel first mentality is backward, but our political class hasn't completely caught up. Almost not caught up at all.
So who are the players in this? Well, some of them are in the pundit class. The more ludicrous ones are in the pundit class, but some of them are actual sitting politicians. And if you were to choose one who symbolizes what we're actually debating and the stakes of this conversation, it would have to be Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham is a senator, the senior senator from the state of South Carolina, one of the most conservative, reliably Republican states out of 50. And he has been in Congress since 1994, so that would be 31 years. And he is running for yet another term as a U.S. senator. He's 70 years old. He'd like to serve till he's 77. And he has the support, not simply of the White House, he has an endorsement from the president, but he has more donor support probably than anyone who's ever run in the history of the United States. I mean, Lindsey Graham has so much donor support, and donors, just as a numerical question, probably represent, 100th of 1% of the American population, but have a great deal higher proportion of the money. He's the most popular candidate they've ever backed. He's like a higher IQ, less grading Nikki Haley.
Yeah, Nikki Haley, that's an apt comparison. He never knew a war he didn't love. He'd never do a war he didn't want to support. Said that, the American money being spent on Ukraine is the best American money that can be spent. It's so absurd. And just to reiterate, again, if you're still toting the Trump line, Trump is endorsing this swamp creature, this neocon. And he's saying constantly in True Social posts that Massey has to be primaried. That is what we're dealing with here.
Ron DeSantis. And so they'll be backing him, and all things being equal, he will be reelected. And so why does this matter? Well, it matters not because Lindsey Graham is like a horrible person. I mean, he may be a horrible person. The truth is Lindsey Graham is actually a very charming person and a very interesting dinner partner and a fun person to be with, hilariously funny. I met him for the first time. I was his seatmate on a campaign bus in 1999. He was a member of Congress, and we spent a couple of weeks sitting next to each other.
Well, Tucker's a better man than I, because I couldn't call him that. Anyone that close to the levers of power that favors the destruction and the vaporization of millions of people, as Lindsey Graham has, from Iraq to Syria to Libya to Ukraine to the genocide in Israel, to the war in Iran. I'm sorry, I can't call that a good person, no matter how they behave in their private life. That's not something I could say. So I guess Tucker's a better man than me if he's saying that, and he can find redemptive qualities in this person. I would if he changed his ways on war and killing people. It seems like I would not want to be a fan of Ted Bundy. He was charming too, outside of his killing sprees.
By the end, I thought to myself, I love this guy. He's hilarious. Always a joke. Always has a drink in his hand. Like he's genuinely a cheerful person, probably fun to play golf with. So the reason that this is an important race is not because Lindsey Graham is like Mark Levin, someone if you were stuck in an elevator with him, you'd have to obviously kill yourself because you couldn't handle it. He's not that. You'd enjoy being stuck in an elevator with him. The reason it's so important is because Lindsey Graham is the living symbol of the old Republican Party, the Republican Party that did a lot, almost as much as the Democratic Party, to destroy the United States.
Well, they sure did, and who can doubt that Mark Levin would be horrible to ride in an elevator with? I don't think anyone can deny that whatsoever.
And so if he is reelected next November, that will be a sign that actually the democratic system doesn't work. Lindsey Graham's views are not popular. They are despised in the state of South Carolina. His views, if you were to disaggregate Lindsey Graham from what he believes and just poll Republican primary voters in South Carolina, do you agree with this? Lindsey Graham would be less popular than the Democrat because his views are repugnant to Republican voters and to Trump voters. And so if he were to get elected anyway, it would tell you that the system doesn't respond to the concerns of voters. And therefore, the system isn't working and isn't legitimate because the point of the system is to respond to those concerns. And so a lot is at stake. If Lindsey Graham wins, it will be the most dispiriting thing to happen in American politics in a very, very long time. So if Kamala Harris were to win in the last, a year ago tonight, it would be horrible. She'd be an awful president, probably even worse than Biden, insecure, fragile, weird, dumb. You can just imagine, nightmare. But at least you could say, well, she was elected by a party that kind of agrees with her. Kamala Harris got elected because the Democrats are insane. Okay. What's the excuse if you're a Republican voter, if you're a Trump voter, for electing Lindsey Graham?
Well, there's no excuse, and the fact that Trump himself endorses and campaigns for him is simply unforgivable in my mind. There will be Trump loyalists that have, special kind of justifications for this, always unmanifested genius in this, always 4D chess to support this, but it's utter lunacy. We're done with the 4D chess. Lindsey Graham is a supervillain, is a swamp creature, is Israel first and Ukraine first to the core. Before that, he was supporting all the regime change wars. All the ones that we know didn't work out for the American people, caused millions of deaths. In the war on terror alone, 5 million deaths worldwide. Thousands of U.S. troops, some of them came back and couldn't handle getting back into society, rightly so, because of what they saw, the horrific events of war. Some of them off themselves because of that. It's horrifying. And some of them still have, PTSD and other prolonged effects from that is kind of unspeakable and kind of shoved under the rug. We never talk about that. Why do we never talk about that? Well, it's because they still need propaganda for the next regime change war. Right now, they're drumming it up for Venezuela. It's narco-terrorism. Guess who also supports that? What do you know? It's Lindsey Graham, who's gone on several interviews the last 2 weeks saying, hey, now we have a president that means business. Carefully managing Trump's ego, because that's what the neocons do to win him over to their side, as they constantly do. They've done that with Israel and Ukraine, too. We have a president that means business against narco-terrorism, despite the fact that drugs generally don't even come in from Venezuela. Fentanyl, zero of it does. Almost no cocaine does. But they're drumming this up because they want regime change there. They have since the first Trump term. Well, Lindsey Graham is emblematic of all that. Tucker Carlson's exactly right about why he shouldn't get elected. But Trump's doing everything he can to elect him. This is America first Trump, right? And I say that in quotations because he's so clearly military-industrial complex, Israel, and Ukraine first. And Saudi Arabia, by the way. The blockade there continues, and Trump used one of his sole vetoes in his first term to keep U.S. intervention in that war going. That's where we're at right now. America First is at a crossroads, right? And the hypocrisy is too glaring among some in that coalition when they see what the priorities truly are, that it's not inflation, it's not debt, it's not, the cost of living and affordability, which, by the way, Zoran Mamdani, no matter what you think about, he just won largely because America's unaffordable. Whether he can fix that or not, I have my doubts, of course. But he did get elected for talking about that when everyone else is talking about more spending and more taxation and adhering to the whims of this rogue Israeli regime committing a genocide. That is why he won. And that's going to be a microcosm for all sorts of other political victories, maybe by the Democrats in the midterms. This is, a big battle for the spirit of the Republican Party right now. We're seeing it play out. Trump had the highest support he ever had exactly a year ago, and it's all basically been squandered. His approval ratings are in the dumps. It's the Epstein files. It's Israel first mentality. It's disastrous regime change wars and a new war with Iran. It's many things, but unless America First course corrects, we're going to see more of that, and we're going to see more failings, because Trump has to balance the electoral rhetoric and propaganda that he spews out with the reality that he's being controlled by all these lobbies, including especially the Israel lobby. But what do you guys think? Is Tucker Carlson correct? Is this a big battle for the spirit of the MAGA coalition? How's it going to play out? Are the Democrats just going to overtake Republicans if they continue down this path? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Tucker. Great segment, I think. I think Tucker really gets this. He really understands it. I'd love him to be more critical of Trump, but he does get this. Also, if you like this video, please become a YouTube member or consider becoming one by clicking the join button below. If you do that, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. You'll be able to see all those members only videos right away. And also, if you want a free copy of my book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below, plug in your email, I'll send that right to you free of charge, right through your email. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.